In this video, I'm going to talk about terrain model creation and some basic terrain model editing. And I'm going to be recommending some new procedures in this video. In the past, we had recommended disabling the survey processing rules and then using the terrain commands to edit the terrain model itself. We're no longer recommending disabling the rules. We want to keep those active, and we're going to use some other tools to edit the terrain model. The two common edits we see are removing some of the edge triangles and swapping a triangle leg. So I'm going to show you a different method to do that, leaving the survey processing rules active. And the reason we want the rules active is if we go back and have to add any additional survey data to this, those rules need to be active in order for it to draw linear features and to make changes to the terrain model itself. So by doing it this way, we can keep those rules active and make the edits a different way. So I'm going to start by creating my terrain model. So I'm going to right-click on my field book and choose the Create Terrain Model option. And I can see the boundary is displayed. So this is a change from previous ODOT standards. In the past, we had the default feature definition set to the triangles. Now we have the default feature definition for terrain models set to only the boundary. So if I want to display the triangles, I'm going to use the element selection tool, select the terrain model, and from the pop-up menu, pick the properties. And in the properties dialog, I can see the features set to the existing boundary. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to the X triangles option. I also see the edge method is defaulting to the maximum edge length with a value of 100. So this is one place where you can start to look at your triangles and see I have some areas here where there's some triangles formed that I don't want. And maybe I want to reduce those. Well, I can reduce that by changing the length of my maximum edge length. So I'm going to change that to 50 feet. And I can see that reduce some of the triangles. Now you want to be careful with this parameter. If you set it too small, I'll change it to 25 feet. You're going to see some areas where it's going to take out some triangles that you wanted to keep. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back to the default value of 100. And let's talk about some other edits. In this particular data set, the surveyor was asked to collect a cross-section of the channel out away from the road itself. Now there was too much vegetation here for them to collect data between there, so we've got some areas where they just collected some cross-section type information for the designer. What I want to do is remove those from the terrain model. So I can edit a point to remove it by the terrain model by selecting the point, looking at its properties, and I can see that its terrain model attribute is determined by the feature definition. So this is brought in as a spot. I'm going to change that particular point to do not include. So that's a single edit on an individual point. If I want to remove all these points, I can use the selection tool and select those points. And in the properties dialog for the terrain model attribute, I can change all those to do not include to remove them from the terrain. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'll select these points and I'll just go ahead and tell it do not include. Now there are some edge triangles that I might want to get rid of, and maybe I want to clean up this area down here. So on this side I've got a point, and I can change that point to do not include. And that'll remove that. But on this side I have a break line that's included for a ditch. So just changing the feature definition of the point isn't going to remove these triangles because of that break line continuing through here. So what I could do on this one, if I wanted to get rid of that, I could change or edit this particular linear feature and remove that last point from the linear feature itself. So if I get the menu for this, let's try that again. So I'll select my linear feature, and I'm going to go ahead and remove a point from the linear feature. So I'm going to take this last point out. And you'll see that gets rid of some of these triangles that went out beyond where most of the survey was collected. So there's a couple simple edits you may consider to clean up some things. Now, the next thing I want to do is maybe get rid of some of these edge triangles. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, in the past we had recommended disabling the survey processing rules, which would let me use the terrain commands to edit the terrain model. We're no longer recommending that process. what we're going to recommend is adding a boundary to the terrain as a ruled boundary, and then we can edit that ruled boundary, and that will get rid of some of those extraneous triangles that we don't want. So I'm going to use in the survey group in the terrain tab the add boundary option, and what I'm going to do is add a ruled boundary. For the feature definition, I'm going to select the X terrain boundary feature, so that's under the linear features. Under survey, there's an office use category with some terrain editing features, so we'll use the boundary option, and I'm going to allow it to use the default name of boundary 1. So it asks me to pick the terrain model, so I'll choose the terrain, and then I'll accept my method of adding a ruled boundary. So what that does is just creates a MicroStation line string element that is the boundary for this terrain, and any edits I make to this line string will be applied to the terrain. So if I want to take out these triangles, I'm going to insert a vertex in this line string right here at this corner, and that will remove these extra triangles. So I'll use my MicroStation insert vertex command. So in the drawing tab, I'll find the insert vertex command, and I'll just pick my line string, and I'm going to insert a vertex by snapping to that corner, and I can see those triangles are removed. So I'm going to come over here and do the same thing on this side. There's some triangles here that maybe I don't need. So I'll insert a vertex, and I'll just snap to a couple of points here where I want to remove those triangles. So what I like about this is if I have to go back up and pick up additional survey, maybe I need another 100 feet on the south end of this, I can bring that in as another data file in the same field book. And then I can edit this boundary to include that area. So I don't have to disable the processing rules. If I had disabled processing rules when I bring in more data, it will not draw the line work for that data because that is a survey processing rule. So by leaving that on, I can easily add data and then either recreate it or edit this boundary as I need to. So I mentioned another common edit is the swap. So I'm going to zoom into this middle area, and here's a couple triangles. Maybe I want this to swap the leg to go the other direction. So what I'm going to do is insert a break line across there and then add that break line to the terrain. And I'm just going to use a MicroStation place line command in order to do that. Now when I'm placing this as a break line, I want to make sure I pick the level, weight, and color. And you can see we have a survey existing terrain break line level that we've designated for this. I chose it by using the element template. You can either just choose the level or choose the element template, whichever you prefer. Element templates are something that have been in the software for a long time, but we've never used them. And they are used in OpenRoads Designer kind of behind the scenes to set symbology for our features. But if you want to look at the element templates, there is under survey in the element templates, there's an office use category and terrain editing. And there's the terrain break line option. So I just picked that element template and that set the level, color, style, and weight. So in my drawing tab, I'm going to use the place line command. And I'm going to place a line where I want to insert a break. And I'm going to snap to this triangle leg and come over and snap to this triangle leg and draw that line. And I could continue drawing any other break lines that I wanted to. Maybe I want to insert a break line across here. There's the actual outlet of my, or the elevation of my culvert. You know, I could insert that as a break across here. What the heck? It's a training video. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to snap to the origin of that point, and I'm going to go ahead and draw that across to here. And I'm going to insert both of those as break lines into my terrain model. Oops, I didn't accept that other end. Let's do that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to bring both those in. So I'll go back to my terrain editing, and I'm going to go to the feature management group, and I'm going to pick the add features. And it asks me to select the terrain model, so I'll just pick the terrain model. And it asks me what element do I want to add. I'm going to pick this line and this line. And it says reset when done, so I'll reset. And I need to pick the feature type. And there's a drop-down list of feature types that I can insert. Well, this is going to be a break line. So I'll go ahead and accept that. And now both of those were inserted as break lines in the terrain. So what I like about this process is I now have a record of any changes I made by inserting a break line. If I'd used the edit terrain model and the swap command, Later on, I have no idea which triangles I actually edited and did that to. So now I've got some lines on their own level that I've got as a visual record of what I had done and the changes I had made to this particular terrain model. So that's just an overview of creating a terrain and some common edits. And if you have any questions, just contact the Office of CAD and Mapping Services.